So no, hey, congratulations for Last Survivors.
Thank you. Thank you, Gig.
Hey, not this is a great film. This is a one intense thriller from from start to finish. So how did this project came about with you?
Like all my films, I developed them very early on. This was from scratch. It was a writer I knew well. We'd worked together on something, and he wanted to do something about doomsday preppers, and it sort of evolved into this sort of metaphorical idea of like a man deciding humanity going bad is equal to an apocalypse without giving too much away. But it sort of came from that. We developed it. And, like all movies, it has a little bit of a journey to the screen. And, we were just so happy that like we got it made in the pandemic and like where what the final product is. We're very proud of the film.
There is that irony of that pandemic that's around an apocalypse is kind of apocalyptic film like this, isn't it?
Yes, and it was really funny because we're going to make it February of 2020, or getting make it. We pause, and by the time we made it, the themes of the film and what like real life imitating art was really kind of intersecting us the whole way through. Even making the film, we were isolated in Montana. We weren't allowed. You're only allowed to be close to like 4 or 5 people. Like I was in the cast's little zone, so I could be around them, but like the director and I could not be in a room without our masks on. All sorts of isolationist things happening that maybe help the movie somehow.
Or at least mentally that it helped the movie.
Yes, yeah.
Put you guys in a mental state. So
Exactly.
tell us about this Montana setting. I guess Montana is the perfect setting for any type of wilderness survivalist type of movie, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Montana is beautiful. It is a level of beautiful that you couldn't make Montana on a film set or CGI. Like in some ways, I think we just lucked out. We were actually going to make the film in Georgia, and we moved to Montana for the rebate initially. But then when we saw pictures, we were like, it is stunningly beautiful, and what a perfect place. I mean, the exterior of Henrietta's cabin, the interior was all real. The only stage we worked on was the interior of Troy's cabin. Everything else was on location. So, in fact, the Film Commission is doing a big screening in Butte, Montana on Friday. They're just so proud of this film too, because it's, completely shot in Butte, Montana.
Now, you mentioned that, a film like this should be, really been done on a set stage besides that one particular set or CGI. So how long did it take to find remote locations like this, or was it just movie magic? Is actually just in a cabin?
There is a woman named Jocelyn Dodge who was our location expert in Montana, and they found them within a week. We got very lucky with all these locations. They're all within half an hour of Butte, so we could get to them easily. They were all very cold. Like, this is an independent film, so there was no heating tent with heating stones, for producers to sit in. It was that snowstorm. There's a scene where Jake is taken back to that secret spot, and I find it so beautiful in the movie with the snow coming in, but that was a real snowstorm. It was a whiteout snowstorm and minus 10 degrees when we shot that. So the elements actually contributed to our experience in the film.
You know what? I was going to say, call me crazy or call you crazy. Why did you guys want to put yourself through that cold weather? I mean, I felt cold watching this film.
Yeah. First of all, never again. I don't know why. I don't think I realized, because I'd never done a movie in the snow. Years ago, we made Salt in New York City in the winter, and we'd shoot on Long Island in the snow. I mean, this is a big budget studio film. Salt was. You had all the heat lamps and hot stone this, and it was, it was perfectly fine. On this one, I don't even think I realized like what we were putting ourselves through. I'll tell you, before I left Montana, I donated to Goodwill all of my mountain shoes and like warm clothes. I'm like, I'm never shooting outside again, so I'm never going to need these clothes again. like unless it's a big budget film. It was tough.
So the environments and the the locations seems like they're the greatest challenges for a production like this, not necessarily the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Montana weather was very unpredictable. And yet I still think when all is said and done, it works so beautifully for the movie. We couldn't look this beautiful, without almost that unpredictability. It also forced us to shoot quickly. Lighting would change in the middle of the afternoon, so it kept us on our feet. Sometimes these sort of like hurdles and like, things that seem like, how do I, jump over them, end up being weirdly an ally to make a better film, which I find fascinating.
Do you enjoy doing indie projects like this, or do you like, the ones with the money?
I mean, look, this year we made our Enchanted sequel for Disney Plus. I love the big ones, but I'll tell you, the small ones, it's pure filmmaking joy because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You're putting a movie together. You don't know, we like our little film here. It's not little, it's Impact, and we world premiered at Fright Fest in London. We've gotten so far in this little film. It's just so gratifying. So I do love it. And I get to work with newer talent, people. Alicia hasn't done a lot of, dramatic roles like this. It was really fun to see her just like, she fell in love with the character and how strong she is. Drew Van Acker being able to play the kind of character that he's never been allowed to play before, and he just excelled. And Stephen Moyer bringing a humanity to what could have been a very dark character. I love that in independent film because you are there for the art as much as the commerce. The bigger films, listen, they're really fun to make. It's just, they're all owned by corporations, the big studios and streamers today. So it's, they're making something slightly different. The vibe of our film, the cinematographer is all young, young cinematographer, young production designer, young hair and makeup. A lot of people who came with nothing but passion and ingenuity because the money wasn't there, which forces them, I think, artistically to really interesting places.
So you feel like you're mentoring these young people on the set?
Oh, I love it. I love taking all the years of experience, and it doesn't mean I'm right, but having somebody there who can assure people. I was telling everyone 4 days into the movie, I'm watching the dailies. I'm obviously on set, but I'm like, this is really good. It will cut together. Don't worry about that. We can, all of those different kinds of things. And it's actually a really, really gratifying thing I've been doing in the past few years. I still want to make bigger films as well, but and I want to make bigger independent films, but you've got to learn the kind of way of an independent film is. I mean, it's literally like, getting ingredients from scratch and not knowing where you're taking your finished cake,
I always tell other people that producers are the ones who either put out fires or bring lunch to the set.
It's one or the other. And on some of these independent films, it's my second or third independent film. I forget which one. I remember after our hair and makeup test, I said, okay, now who cleans up the hair on the floor? And everyone just looks at me. It's you do whatever you need to do. No task is too big or too small. You just get it done. That's what producing is.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You worked with Alicia Silverstone before and Drew Van Acker before, right?
Absolutely. Alicia, I worked with so many years ago on this film called Blast from the Past, which has sort of endured. I read all these articles in the pandemic that it became sort of a pandemic classic. And it was such a pleasure to work with, Alicia today. She's a mom. She's such a talented, delightful person to have worked with again. Van Acker, this is my third film. We have more. We're cooking up together. I just find him being, he's a very good looking guy, but he's such a committed, dedicated actor. He's a character actor and he loves, in so many ways on this film, he was my partner in crime, working with me just with all the different challenges. He never complained being cold. The first 3 days, there was no heating tent for him. He doesn't complain. He did all his own, everything in the movie is him. There's no body double. He's an actor's actor. And that's, a real pleasure for me to work with and talented.
Do you favor working with actors you're familiar with, or you always like the challenges of working with newer actors? characters?
Both are awesome. Every movie I make is like an adventure and a journey, and you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. There's always days where it feels like you're in doom and gloom and this movie's never going to see the light of day. Even the big ones have those days. I like working with really passionate artists in an era today where I think, like I believe filmmaking is business meets art. It's a 50-50 sort of synergistic thing. So I want talent that sort of, has that artistic bent too. It's too easy for me to just go make product. I have nothing against people who just want to make product, but I want to make movies with an artistry that, if everyone is there with a little bit more passion, it all comes together in a better film. So I'll work with, whoever I feel is, appropriate for the material.
For your resume, it's hard to pin down for you to say that you belong in a specific genre, because you basically have done every single type of a Hollywood genre out there. Do you have a preference, or you just love bouncing around?
I love great storytelling. I mean, Star Wars was one of my favorite movies as a kid. Everything from Terms of Endearment, Sound of Music, Dances with Wolves, Gone with the Wind. These are movies I love. And so I want to make movies, with stories I love. And especially to these independent films, like, not everything you do ends up as sort of what you imagined. And there's always going to be like, issues, and you look back at your films. I just want a great story. It's probably, for me, that's the most important thing. I don't really care what the genre is, and a story that, I always believe this, that really good storytelling is way more sophisticated than most people sort of perceive when they watch the film, but they don't need to perceive that extra depth or the extra thematic layers. They need to enjoy it. But if we have it there, something happens in the total sum where your viewing pleasure is just, greater when you watch the movies. I love movies. I want to make movies that hopefully people love. It's why we make them. It's why we watch them.
Oh, I mean, that's where your creative juices actually come in, because it comes in with all different types, which is terrific. But as you mentioned before, you usually do sequels, but Disenchanted is technically a sequel. Is this your first sequel?
It is the first sequel. Look, I'm thrilled that Enchanted has become such a classic. I mean, I developed that script from scratch. We sold it in a 6-studio bidding war to Disney, and then we, made it for Disney. And we've been working on the sequel for many, many, many years. And in the last few years, you could feel that our movie has just endured, and it really made Disney want to make it, which I thought was awesome. Finally, it'll be for Disney Plus later this year. I'm thrilled to make sequels. I'll probably always have my heart and soul in the first original movies first, because that's sort of my joy. But I think to build franchises is just incredible. I hope we make a Salt sequel one day.
I would love a Salt sequel. There's just something so attractive and so, how can you say, mesmerizing watching Angelina Jolie in action. But I'm not even sure. Oh, I guess she's still an action hero after.
Absolutely. And my director, absolutely. She was just such the perfect casting for a character you didn't know whether you're rooting for or against. I'm very proud of that film too. It's also living, and that's what I want. I want these films to live on and on and on. You want them to, and that's going back to the indie films. When you make an independent film, your hope is it will live on and on, but most indie films don't. But it's the challenge every day, and I love it.
I'm just going a little bit back to Disenchanted, because a lot of people are looking forward to that. But in your words, what do you think is the magic behind Enchanted that people love it so much?
I think our original film was very specifically, it's what we developed initially before we even sold it. It's fairy tale idealism colliding with real world intellectual cynicism. You're so smart and educated in the real world, you're dating someone for 5 years before you propose. Whereas in the fairy tale world, the idealism, you're so in love, you're engaged after one song. And it was that thematic that we believe attracted such good actors. Jimmy Marsden and Amy auditioned for those roles back in the day. Amy had not gotten her Oscar nod. and they were just so strong, you know, and it's the material was great. Kevin Lima, our director, truly a gifted director, down to, you know, bringing Alan Menken and Steven Schwartz in for the music. The animators at the beginning were actually the ones who hand drew some of the classic Disney characters. It was really about an artistic endeavor for Kevin Lima that I think made that movie work so well. You know, and it's a smart movie because you can't live in the fairy tale world. It doesn't apply, but we can't get to the point where we're so cynical that we've lost what that idealism is. How do we find that like middle ground? And I really do believe thematics can make a movie sort of resonate in ways that, like, even as what I was saying earlier, audiences don't fully realize when they're seeing it.
Because the only reason why I wanted to bring up these type of movies as a contrast for producers is because when you're producing something like Last Survivors here, it's a stark contrast to producing a musical like Enchanted, or even an action film like Salt. Could you talk more about how do you transition, you know, your producer hat from one film to another film like this, where there's no similarities whatsoever?
I think it's always starting with the script and what's best for the movie. Again, Last Survivors is about three flawed characters to figure out humanity and hatred. You know, one of the characters, Troy, is sort of let sort of the darker side take over. He's not a villain. Henrietta's character, Alicia Silverstone, is struggling in the middle, whereas Jake, who struggles with it, ultimately lets his idealism and hope kind of triumph by the end. And so I think you have these thematics and these characters. It's almost like the wind-up toys. You wind it up and let's what's organically right for the movie, despite the genre, you know, make it work. One of the things that was really interesting about Last Survivors is it's shot so beautifully. There's so much heart to all three of the performances. You know, the score is a beautiful, almost modern interpretation of an old-fashioned sort of James Newton Howard score. But all of these things aren't actually thriller elements, which is sort of interesting. You know, the movie ends up being intense, but it's actually kind of a dramatic thriller underneath it all, which almost, you know, there's a stylization to the movie where it lives in almost like a fable-like world, and yet it is a thriller movie. We were premiered at a thriller, horror, sci-fi, you know, a film festival. So it's all about, like, you know, what is organically good for this story. It's never about like one thing or the other. It's like start with that script and go from there.
That is great. And one more thing before I let you go is what's your enjoyment of this career of producing? Because, you know, a lot of people don't usually see the producers. You know, people know the directors, the writers, the actors, but you guys are the ones who put it all together. So what is your enjoyment? Because it's a lot of headache.
It's a lot of headache, but I'll tell you, when you make a movie that people love, I don't even need them to know that I made it, but you see it on their face and it's incredible. When we opened Enchanted to 50 million with rave reviews, it was so surreal that just years earlier, I'm spitballing this idea with a writer, you know, like, and here it is becoming this worldwide event. And it's just so gratifying, you know, even as I said, like world premiering Last Survivors in London's Fright Fest, Leicester Square last October, and then playing at Leeds, to see those first audiences, you know, really enjoy the film. It's just so gratifying, you know. Ultimately, I make a movie, and the fun of it for me is, you know, the impact it has. The process is really fun too. The challenge is, it's a jigsaw puzzle, balancing money with creativity. It's just, it's awesome. It's sort of it's what I always dreamed of doing, and it's living a dream to some degree. It is headaches though. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot of headaches.
Well, you produced plenty of films that we do all love. So, hey, thank you very much for speaking to us for Last Survivors, and thank you for talking to us about all these other projects that are memorable.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Next time.